The OA-4M Skyhawk. Skyhawk tour on that thing. Look man, that would have been funny when I first started writing the script, trust me. Join me as I lay my first and hopefully only Shelf Queen to rest and build Fujimi's deceptively good rendition of quite possibly the best looking but most obscure variant of the Skyhawk. For reasons that will become abundantly clear soon, this build started with the air intake ducting. No locating features or anything, just a butt join. It's not too bad if you use the compressor fan bulkhead thing as a jig though. Off to a great start. Okay, so the cockpit, right. I got this kit as a gift for free because the previous owner wasn't planning to build it anytime soon and couldn't shift it at swap-in cells. Epic, I thought, until I opened the box and found one of the cockpits snipped from the sprue and nowhere to be seen. Not epic. After saying every swear word known to man as loudly as humanly possible, I noticed that judging by the instructions, the front and rear cockpit are effectively identical, down to the instrument panel and everything. So, after a few hours in SolidWorks and spending a not unreasonable amount of money to get a guy to print it, as well as a few other bits, ooh foreshadowing, the ejection seat didn't fit. Fuck! After staying up until 12, banging my head at the wall and spending a slightly less reasonable amount for a guy to print out the new revised actually correct version, I finally had an cockpit tub. Both the kit parts and my resin recreation thankfully had raised detail, so I didn't have to bother with the frankly crap looking decals. Just a quick picking out of all the bits and a dry brush were all they needed to look decent. Also, just as an aside, but the Escapac ejection seats included in the kit aren't that great. They look the part, but they have a void in the back for which I don't have any plastic art to fill them in with, and they have very crudely molded in seatbelt detail that I didn't have the foresight to sand off and do myself, even though that probably would have looked a lot better. The kit gives you the option to have the canopy open, but frankly, you'd have to do a lot of work to warrant it, which I wasn't materially or mentally equipped for. Moving on to general construction, and it's shit. The nose section was an utter pig to work with. The part that represents the gear bay just straight up didn't fit, and the two nose halves had several kilometers worth of slot, and could get comically misaligned very easily. The fuselage generally fits together quite well, but for some reason it doesn't play well with the intake ducting, which caused it to ping off a few times. The fuselage to wing join is actually bloody excellent, leaving an absolutely minuscule wing root gap and pretty much no evidence of any join on the underside. But then the nose to fuselage to wing join made me question my continued existence. There's probably a better way to fit the electronic spine, but I did it the idiot caveman way and made cleaning it up infinitely more difficult for myself because I'm an epic pro gamer. And then, as I went to test fit the intakes, I noticed. The part numbers are wrong. They're too short, and they don't even remotely fit with the splitter plates. They're for earlier, non-P408 engine Skyhawks. So, my options were to either A, fit them as is and just cope with the fact that it's gonna all look a bit weird and inaccurate, B, spend an unreasonable amount of time designing new ones in SolidWorks, or C, throw this kit into the ocean. You'll never bloody guess what I ended up doing! There were a bunch of other small parts missing from the box, but none of them were major enough for me to care. After trying my best to fill and sand the gaps and seams, I could finally, after way too long, chuck some primer on. And then, after the primer had fully cured, I went to work on the landing gears. I looked into the box and noticed a distinct lack of nose landing gear. By this point, the 28th of February in 2025 Year of the Gamer, I was a bit fed up and so I put everything in the box and there it sat, untouched, because I got really busy and couldn't go to my scale modeling club meetings for a few months, which was inconvenient because the guy who gifted me the kit ended up finding a bunch of the missing parts. But on the 8th of June, current year plus 10, I ended up receiving those parts, plus an entire whole ass other Fujimi A-4B at the Australian Scale Model Expo, so shout out to Mark, you're an absolute bloody legend. And so, after 3 months, I finally put the landing gears on, and they weren't that good. The main ones are a standard hole and peg with no sort of keying, so they have basically infinite degrees of rotational freedom, and the struts only sort of help guide them into the correct place because of how tiny and vague their locating features are. For reasons probably relating to my inability to get the nose landing gear bay part on properly, the nose gear is on a big fuck off slant, but you know what, my main priority is just to see this one through so I don't really care anymore. After all of that, I could finally move on to painting. The 3 grey low-vis scheme these were typically seen in is pretty simple, consisting of FS 36495, 36375, and 36320, or in other words, light and dark ghost grey plus another mystery grey. I decided to use Vallejo Sky Grey in place of 36495, and it looked good when I tested it off of the model, but then I ran out and had to buy a new bottle, and I think along with changing the design of the bottle they've messed with some of the colours, so now Sky Grey isn't quite as light as it used to be, so it doesn't quite work in this context anymore, but I can't be fucked repainting, so oops, that's just how it is now. I used AK 3rd Gen matches for the Ghost Greys, and they look utterly beautiful. The same can't be said about the quality of my work in some areas, but fuck it, we ball. After painting, I then swiftly got some gloss on and then did the decals. This kit comes with 7 schemes, but they're basically identical, save for numbers and some having names on the canopy frames, so I'm not going to go over them in anything resembling depth this time, partially because A, I don't want to, and B, trying to find anything about the OA-4M is an utter chore, and even finding the image that's on screen right now was a complete and utter fluke. This kit depicts a fairly short-lived, or generally uncommon marking scheme, for lack of a better word, combining high visibility black tailcoats and unit markings alongside low-vis everything else. The squadron in question is MAG-12 Samurais, based at MCAS Iwakuni since the Vietnam War. It seems that typically, you'd see Skyhawks from this group with a little H&MS-12 Yosemite Sam marking on the tail too, but this is not the case here. As for what these aircraft were doing around the time period depicted in the kit, I don't know. Genuinely, the most I could eke out is that MAG-12 participated in a joint exercise between America and Thailand called Thilei Thai 89, but that's genuinely the extent of it. As for the decals themselves, they were, not so good. Given that the sheet was more than likely stored in a box for more years than I've been alive, they turned a bit yellow. I put them on a windowsill to try and bleach them, and even though I thought the sheet looked alright, some decals were still noticeably yellow on the final model, but that's my fault and I probably just need to give them more time. The real issue comes with the fact that they're straight up the wrong colour. Any decals that go on patches of dark ghost grey, which is most of them, are far too dark and basically end up disappearing, which is some proper Italeri shit. In reality, light ghost grey markings go on dark ghost grey surfaces, and vice versa, but with this decal sheet, your only options are indistinct dark grey and indistinct darker grey. This isn't a problem with my sheet specifically, judging by other builds of this kit, they just did that for some reason. The printing's pretty mediocre even for its time, and being Japanese, they're absurdly thick. Fortunately, none of them disintegrated on me, but that's about the only good thing I can say about them. After a coat of satin, I could then proceed to do a lot of oil tomfoolery. First was a panel line wash. Pretty standard, just really thinned down Payne's Grey and burnt umber. Don't have much to say about that. Then, I proceeded to do something vaguely resembling oil paint rendering. The general technique was applying a layer of white spirits, or your preferred type of oil paint thinner here, on the surface of the model, putting oil paint on the model, and then blending it with a brush very lightly dampened in white spirits. You want to go from light to dark, so in this case I used white and buff to simulate paint fade and maybe dust or something, and then mix a black and burnt umber to simulate general grime. From what I've seen, Marine Skyhawks, especially the TPS grey schemed ones from around the 80s, got pretty grimy, so there's scope to go absolutely apeshit with it. In the end, I think I got the general sort of patina, albeit maybe a bit overdone, but there are still certain things I don't quite know how to replicate. I don't know, I'll figure it out eventually. But really, after that, the build was basically done. There was just a bunch of really tedious things that needed doing, like the flaps and slats and landing gear bay doors and the things under wings, after which I could finally call my build of Fujimi's OA-4M Skyhawk done. Frankly, I'm not sure if I'd be the one to look towards for unbiased consumer advice in this case, on account of this kit fought me every step of the way and now I hold major prejudice and mistrust against Fujimi Skyhawks. As previously mentioned, I got this one for free, and for that price, well hey, free kit! On eBay, people are attempting to sell it for anywhere between $40 and $250. Ew. It got re-released in 2020 by Hobby 2000, including a few extra goodies like pre-cut masks and decals that are actually the right colour, and that one retailed for about $35 I think. Whether or not any of those numbers constitute a reasonable amount of money is for you to decide, because at the end of the day, the one I had was a pretty damn contemporary pressing of a 1987 tooling, which was, external factors aside, a bit of a finicky and not really a super fun build, which I can confidently surmise comes from Fujimi's lack of design finesse, as opposed to the molds being a bit worn or whatever else I'd used to excuse the exact same flaws of an equivalently aged Hasegawa kit. The detail's there, everything else isn't though. But still, could be worse, Because being a subject that's even vaguely obscure, your only other options are Hasegawa's OA-4M, which is derived from their 1969 A4F tooling, and probably has all the issues you think it does, or Italary's kit, which is derived from their 1983 A4M, and is almost definitely even worse than you'd expect it to be. I'm gonna be entirely real with you, I'm getting really tired of getting to this part of the video, and then having to reveal that your only options are the scale modeling equivalents of purgatory or literal torture. Maybe I should start exclusively building P-51s or something. What was I talking about again? Oh, yeah, the Fujimi Skyhawk. I don't know, if I started a swap meet for a tenner, I'd snap that shit up in an instant.